All right, everybody. Welcome to Seattle CHADD July Speaker Series. We've got a pretty great presentation tonight. It's on, I hope you all know that you know the topic, that you came here for the topic. It's ADHD and addiction. And I'll give you a little bit more detail before I turn that over to them. I'm Beth Bardeen, and I'm the founder and co-coordinator of Seattle CHADD with Jessica Hespelt. And we'll tell you a little bit more about ourselves. I just wanted to make sure everybody recognized, realized, heard that the meeting's being recorded, and that makes it so that we can put it up on our YouTube channel and also on our website so that you can refer back to it in the future when you want to. But it does mean that it's important that you don't share any of your personal identifying information on it if you don't want to. I mean, I don't encourage it. And then it should be up there within the week. And we ask everybody to sign in. And I am going to just make Jessica co-host real quick. Hang in there, sorry, so that she can help mute. Nope, sorry. Screens, there we go. Okay, so we're going to ask everybody to put their microphones on mute. We'd love to have your video on, but you don't have to have your video on. If you don't have, you know, a picture, if we don't recognize you, I will ask you in the chat to identify yourself, because this is, we like to keep our environment safe. We like to know who's here, and don't really want any, you know, unexpected guests. So if you could all make sure that your profile name is changed to a first and last name, that would be great. And then also sign in for our attendance form, so that we have an idea who's here. And it helps us keep track of kind of the folks that we, you know, the numbers of how we're making the reach in Seattle and actually the Northwest. And I'm willing to bet there's probably people all over the West Coast, and we have a few outside of that area too, including a good friend from Florida here again tonight. So I will, you'll see this QR code on other slides, and we'll post the link in the chat halfway through and again at the end. But please take a moment to sign in with that. If you have any problems signing in, just email seattle@chadd.org and we'll help you get signed in another day. And I'm just going to scroll down. So this is your Seattle CHADD team. As I said, I'm Beth Bardeen, and I'm a neurodiversity advocate and consultant. I like to do speaking too, that's fun. My main topic is RSD. So if you ever want to talk about RSD, that's all I want to talk about. And I love to hear about your RSD too. And I'm on the King County Board for Developmental Disabilities here in Seattle. King County is the 12th largest county in the country, I found out. So that's kind of cool. And my lovely co-coordinator, Jessica Hespelt, who has been helping me with Seattle CHADD, not just helping me, but coordinating Seattle CHADD for 2 years now, was, you know, the two of us were very proud. We won the CHADD Chapter of the Year for 2023. Jessica, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Beth. I think my profile says most of it. The only thing on there that's missing, I guess, is I also co-lead the committee for DEI with the ACO. So that's something else that I guess I should update, Beth. But otherwise, I just want to give a quick plug to why I love Seattle CHADD. So I ended up joining when I was just a parent and a person navigating my own ADHD and a child living with ADHD, and I just needed a community to help reinforce that what I was living and going through was normal and that I was doing my best. And I just needed someone to remind me of that from day to day. So I was honored when Beth reached out to me and invited me to work with her a couple years ago, and here we are. And so if you ever come to our parents' meeting, I am the lead for that, and I will help you navigate all that stuff. But otherwise, welcome to our group tonight, and I hope you have a wonderful time, meet some new people, and get all of the lovely resources that you can from our guest speakers tonight. Thanks, Beth.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's see what's next. Oh, gosh. Okay, I need a mouse. There we go. Yes, there we go. Okay. More sign-in opportunities. I'm gonna zoom by this. You'll have more sign-in opportunities. And did you find us on Seattle on Meetup, Seattle Chat on Meetup? If you did, we'd like you to take the ADHD and Seattle CHADD survey. It helps us know what's important to you with ADHD, what your role with ADHD is, what topics are interesting to you, what times of the day or times of the week are best for meeting. It helps us plan our in-person meetups, but we like to be able to have and then you can be on our mailing listing and get the updated newsletter with the schedules and everything. So this will go in the chat later as well. And next, it's the big topic of the month is ADHD and addiction. So this panel I saw speak last winter at the ADHD conference in Baltimore. And this group of professional women are like, their stories are so easy to relate to, and they make it so that we can see a lot of what they've gone through. We can see it in our own lives, and it hits us. And the thing is that they've done the research. They work the practice in their lives every day. They've learned a lot, and so they're going to be sharing that with us. And just so real quickly, Jeremy Didier is the president of CHADD and co-director of CHADD of Kansas City. And she's an ADHD informed clinical social worker, therapist, and parent coach. And so she brings years of this focus and is instrumental in leading CHADD right now. So I'm super excited to have her on tonight. Then Suzanne Sophos. So I could share way more about Suzanne because she's an incredibly generous peer support specialist that I met probably about a little more than 18 months ago. She's president-elect of CHADD and the director of CHADD of Greater Los Angeles. She's been instrumental in helping Seattle CHADD grow and learn without so many speed bumps as I was having before I met her. So I can't say enough about Suzanne's help. Dr. Tonya Miles, she's a clinical psychologist, extensive experience and in treating ADHD and addiction. She works to help people understand and manage the two conditions. And so I'm really interested in hearing her, I guess, perspective, her experience from both sides. And then Dr. Chris Foster, she's co-chair of the CHADD Education Committee, a public school educator and an adjunct professor at Wichita State University. So I'm so honored and excited to present these four amazing women, and really hope that you enjoy and get as just everything that you need out of this presentation. Jessica and I will be watching the chat, and when we get your questions, we'll let you know that we got your question, that we saw it with a thumbs up or, some sort of indication. And then we'll keep track of the questions for when we get to the Q&A time. And then we'll be able to work with the panel to go through them. So before we move on, one more thing. Whoa, too many fast. Shoot. I was bragging about how I knew how to push all the buttons. All right. So Seattle CHADD, the local CHADD chapters are free of charge because we are local chapters of the national nonprofit CHADD. CHADD National is supported by membership dues. And so individual members, professional memberships help support. And what I've learned is that this slide of all these different things is a bit overwhelming for my ADHD brain. But not only that, even just the words for each bullet, it just doesn't tell you what the real experience is. And so I'm not going to go through a lot of these. I just put one in the reminder for tonight's meeting, which is an article on how peer support works so well in an ADHD treatment plan, and written by Suzanne Sophos. Thank you. Yes. And that is a benefit. Like some of the articles on time blindness, I'm going to start featuring the benefits of the national membership inside of the newsletter, because the actual experiences of it, because I haven't experienced all these things, but each time I do, my mind is blown by what I get through it. And so it's part of the reason why Jessica and I do this, is that we want to be able to help folks get access to this, from the annual conference in Anaheim in November, all the way to this ADHD helpline that you can call if you just not sure what to do. They have staff trained to help get you off to support that, what you need. And it's been really, I think, a great program to work with. So let me just, my favorite slide. I never get tired of this slide. Jessica put this in like a year and a half ago. And it doesn't just mean here in the deck. I keep one in my office on my wall across from me, because I always need to be reminded of this. So with that, Suzanne, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to stop screen sharing. There we go.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. Can you guys all see that? It should say shiny, sparkly, and sober. I am Jeremy Didier. And just like a pro tip, you guys can tell who's going to be sharing each slide, because we put our pictures at the top so that we know who was going to talk on each slide. So I want to thank Beth and Seattle CHADD and Jessica for inviting us to present. This was definitely a presentation that came from the heart that we put together last year. And I'm super fortunate to present with these amazing women, and also very fortunate to be a member of CHADD and to be a member of ADHD KC. I'm an adult with ADHD. You want to go ahead and go to the next slide? We'll do the introductions real quick. I mean, you already introduced us, but I'm just going to tell a few more fun facts. So I'm an adult with ADHD. I have 5 kids. 4 of them have ADHD. Both of my parents were alcoholics. 2 of my siblings are in recovery. One was addicted to meth, and the other one was addicted to stimulant medication. I identify as an alcoholic. In October, I will have been sober. I'll be sober 17 years. And, I got diagnosed with ADHD after I got sober, and it was a huge eye opener for me. I wish that I had known that I had ADHD a long time ago. My brother was diagnosed with ADHD when he was in high school, but he's 10 years younger than I am. But that didn't, actually help him from becoming addicted to his stimulant medication. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how that incorporates into having ADHD and how you treat your ADHD when you're living in recovery. I'm a licensed master addiction counselor in addition to being a therapist, and I'm really passionate about working with justice-involved individuals who have ADHD and are struggling with substance use disorder. And that's why I'm here today. You know, if there's anything that I can share, that we share today that helps you out, then our work here is done. So Chris, you want to go next?
If you notice, Jeremy and I will probably be muting and unmuting regularly because we're sitting across the room from each other in Seattle. So, hey, I'm Dr. Chris Foster. I am a public educator. I teach baking and pastry primarily now, and I teach doctoral students in educational psychology as well. Why? Because I have ADHD. I am certified in 6 different subjects. So when I get bored in my day job, I just change subjects. So I'm certified in French, social studies, art, facts, ESOL, and I'm forgetting one, and I can't think of what it is right now. So I will celebrate 19 years of sobriety in November, if all goes according to plan, one day at a time. I have known Jeremy since high school. Back in the day, yeah, we did a lot of that. But we also didn't like each other. And yeah, no, like with a fiery passion, we didn't like each other. And you know, in learning about my ADHD, I was not diagnosed until 46. I think I'm I'm the oldest one on here. So I'm 55. And so it's only been 9 years that I've known about mine. And so the only reason that I found out that I have ADHD is because of Jeremy. She was like, you might want to kind of like look at this little quiz thing and see what you answer. And because I couldn't figure out why I was having some issues with my sobriety. And so that really kind of like put a whole new light on everything. And it has helped me become a better teacher, a better mother. And I got married for the very first time through almost 3 years ago. My son does not have ADHD, but he does have some of our fun little ancillary secondary things. So I don't know. I think that's pretty much it for me.
Real quick, each time somebody talks, I want to kind of weigh in if we need a microphone check. So, Chris, if you can, I don't know what your microphone setup is, but yeah, if you can just be closer, more definite. I don't know. It's a little soft, but I know that you and Jeremy are in close confines and trying to, so thank you.
Oh, the irony of my voice being soft. That's hilarious. I love that. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah.
Okay, and with that, I pass to Suzanne, I think. Isn't that how we did it? Okay. All right,
Sure.
Suzanne, you're up.
Sure. Hi, I'm Suzanne Sophos. I am a certified peer support specialist, which means that all the best things that I learned in AA, I get to like basically take along the way. I have been sober from alcohol for 19 years this past March. I was a very, I guess do they still call it high functioning? I was a very high functioning alcoholic until I wasn't. So, you know, when I finally stopped drinking, I did have people in my life who were like, what? Drinking, you were so fun when you were drinking. And I was like, yeah, but I wasn't paying my bills and doing all the other things. I certainly was not anywhere close to becoming a parent or anything like that. So, you know, I did get sober 19 years ago. So it was before I was a parent. it was also before I was diagnosed with ADHD because like Jeremy's story, my son was diagnosed with ADHD, and I started researching about it and understanding more about it. And I was like, damn, why didn't anybody tell me that I had this when I was younger? So I do think that it would have been easier to go through trying to get sober if I had that information about myself. But I certainly didn't know at the time that basically everything about the way my brain works stacked me up to be the perfect alcoholic. So it's been a really long and windy recovery journey. And I'm excited to talk about that and talk about what we can do to support ourselves when we're like in recovery and what that looks like. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Beth, for hosting tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tonya.
Hello. Thank you all for having us. As mentioned, I am a psychologist and I work in private practice. And I decided in 3rd grade that I wanted to be a psychologist because I had an untreated ADHD mother and with high anxiety and an alcoholic father. And I clearly remember I need to figure out what's wrong here and figure out how to get out of here. So that led me down to drinking. And so I've been sober for 29 years, 11 months, and 11 days. So I'm coming up on 30 at the end of the month, and which was just shocking to me. I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until my very first CHADD conference in 2006, which is when shortly after my oldest son was diagnosed. I have 3 boys. I say boys, they're men now. Raised 3 sons that anxious ADHD kids. And so I feel like we went on the journey of figuring all of this out together. And so in private practice, I do a lot of, obviously with ADHD and addiction and also trauma, and a few other things as well, but excited to be here.
You're on mute.
That was cool. I sounded great too, just so you all know. So if I mess up now, it was perfect before. But we're going to dive into a topic that's close to obviously all 4 of our hearts, the intersection of ADHD and addiction. And what we're going to do is we're going to take you on a journey covering 3 areas. First, we're going to talk about the prevalence of addiction in people with ADHD and the challenges that they have managing their addictive behavior due to things like impulsivity and self-regulation challenges. And then next, we'll be talking about navigating sobriety while living with ADHD. So recovery is not one size fits all. There's 4 of us here, and there's 4 different paths to recovery. Every journey to recovery is as unique as the individual. And I think that we're all unique with our ADHD too. So it makes it, it definitely not one size fits all. And then lastly, we'll talk about life's challenges and maintaining and recalibrating our sobriety when life gets in the way, as it will. So understanding these 3 areas can really help us kind of build our toolkits for sobriety that are tailored to our own experiences.
Sorry, had to unmute. Beth, can you give me a thumbs up if this is better? Okay, perfect. So we will discuss all the different kinds of substance use disorder and some of the neurological implications. Not knowing that you have ADHD and sobriety can really make getting and staying sober hard. So we're going to talk about the difficulties that you might have with undiagnosed ADHD. It's very, like we've said along already, there's multiple paths. We all do things differently, and that's kind of the beautiful part of both our ADHD and our sobriety. So, and then some of our very specific and special neurodivergent challenges, both in regards to relapse, but also our relationships. Really quickly, I would just like to say, I've already shared about Jeremy and I being friends for a very long time. Jeremy introduced me to Tonya through a conference for women with ADHD. And I met Suzanne at a meeting. Trying not to break your anonymity here. But it's a little late for that. But I met Suzanne at a meeting in Philadelphia at the CHADD conference. And so when we went to the Dallas conference, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to see her. She was so cool. Jeremy, you got to meet her. And then I'm like, oh, you guys already know each other. And so that kind of has started this whole thing, and the importance of relationships, both for us with our ADHD, but also the relationships with other women in sobriety, other people in sobriety, and just how important that is for us. So some of the things in regards to addiction that we're going to discuss, addiction and impulse control. We don't have the world's greatest impulse control sometimes. I don't know if any of you have that issue. My husband does not like my yarn addiction, but it's a lot better than drinking. So we have the three kind of areas that we are going to discuss. The substances. Some people are like, well, but I take prescription drugs. Yes, but do you take them as prescribed? That's the key phrase there. Alcohol. Well, I only drink every once in a while, but do you drink to the point that you're blacking out? So it's that kind of what we're talking about. The different behaviors that we might display, gambling, shopping, all of the sex addiction. And then the whole issue with technology. I don't know about anybody else. I'm a complete and utter nerd. So the researching things, right? Suzanne said they're going, yeah. So like I can get on a tangent and then I am gone for like 3 or 4 hours. And my husband's like, what did you do? And I'm like, I'm gonna look stuff up. I was learning, like that can't be bad, but it's 3 hours of, and then luckily, and as a teacher, I currently teach high school, it's like talking to the kids. I'm like, and then all of a sudden you're watching cat videos 3 hours later when you were supposed to work on your term paper. And they're all like, oh yeah. So those are kind of the areas that we're going to be talking about.
All right, so slide's just so fun. I love this picture. So as mentioned, with, definitely impulse control is a problem with ADHD. So we have executive functioning deficits that is the last part of our brain to develop, and which most of us, well, many of us are introduced to substances or risky behaviors before this part of our brain has finished developing. But when you have ADHD, there's a delay in that part of the brain developing. So in addition to impulse control being an issue, just general self-regulation, like being able to, get to places on time, or organizing things, but also regulating your emotions. And that can be really significant too when you are also a preteen or a teenager and you're trying to navigate the world of, school and social dynamics and things like that. So dopamine is a big important element in both addiction and ADHD. So it's really, honestly, we have the 21% prevalence rate of comorbidity between ADHD and substance use disorder listed here, but the numbers vary greatly depending on what you're reading, and certainly using the broad term substance use. And, Chris just mentioned, several types of behaviors. These things are so hard to measure. So how do we, how do we measure yarn addiction? Or I don't know of any scales for that yet. But or shopping addiction, and so that kind of goes into this, how do we, some of these things, how do you diagnose? And certainly, so some of these things are undiagnosed, and some are, people are self-identifying with either ADHD or neurodivergence, as well as having issues with addiction or substances or problem impulsive behavior. Um, so I'll try to speak up a little bit. I just saw a note about that. Is that any better? Okay. All right. So there's when there is, so people that have ADHD, and this is particularly true if they are not treated with medication or identified at an earlier age, they definitely will tend to have higher rates of alcohol, drug use, risky behaviors, and tend to start those things at an earlier age. And they have a tendency to use multiple substances, which can cause great disaster. We also see higher rates of suicidal, like high-risk behaviors or hospitalizations, and also obviously kind of like lower treatment adherence because they're busy doing other things. So, so we know that dopamine is important in learning, and it's part of what's happening that helps us. You hear people talking about dopamine and kind of following what's exciting, and certainly that's a part of it, but it's a big thing in learning and retaining information so that we can remember where the berries are, so that we know where our food source is. But when we use drugs and alcohol, it like releases a bunch of dopamine all at once, and it gives us that like euphoria, or for some people it just kind of can help them feel calm. I've worked with some untreated ADHD people that used meth and would talk about how it was help them feel calm, and it makes sense. I mean, other people would think, well, why would that happen? Or we talk, a lot about nicotine use, caffeine use, and how sometimes those substances are abused in order to kind of help a person feel more attentive or calm, and as a way of trying to self-medicate. So that's where you start to see a lot of the intermingling between the two. And again, sometimes people are trying to use things to help them manage and cope, not necessarily going out to try to, to just kind of have a high. So, but it can be a very slippery slope. So this slide, we're gonna, oh, it's still choppy. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure. Okay, well, we're getting ready to switch to me anyway, so I don't see if we can figure it out. I apologize. So
Maybe, I don't know if you can lean in a little bit or something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I'll see if I can switch my.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I apologize. We were just going to talk about some different examples of what it can look like, and so I was going to start, and then Jeremy can jump in. But I laugh because I work with a lot of ADHD people, and so frequently, like in my office, it's very common that they're late, or they miss their appointment and come on the wrong day. But then when you see if they're struggling with, any type of impulsive, addictive behaviors, you start to see, like, it's one thing if they're struggling in their job, but because of, being late, but if it's because they're spending excessive amounts of time researching things and struggling to shift, or because they're staying up late drinking at the night before. And so, or I'll see a lot of people kind of losing track of time. And certainly that happens with ADHD, but they're losing track of time because they aren't remembering, they're blacking out and not sure what they're doing. So I'll let Jeremy jump in.
I kind of wanted to chime in on this one because this was one of the ones that I see the indicators of addiction starting in the classroom. I've taught everywhere from 6th to 12th grades. And when we're looking at addiction, obviously the phone is kind of one of the big ones right now. And I say the phone, but it's like the multiple things that are on said phone, the social media, the games, the, all of the other stuff. But I do see, my students, if I can help them with their executive function skills, so that we can maybe learn how to focus better. And we talk about addiction. And I don't make addiction a bad word because, it has this just horrifically bad connotation. And it's just getting kids to understand and recognize you could be addicted in multiple ways without even realizing it. Caffeine. Oh boy, the kids would all tell you that I'm definitely addicted to caffeine. And they know that very, very well. They would say I'm addicted to knitting. They would say that and I'm like, I am. So it's a matter of having to learn how to replace behavior for them. And so this particular slide, I really wanted to kind of like talk about how, as a teacher or a parent, we can see if there are signs of addiction or ADHD, or maybe addiction could be what gets them to the diagnosis for ADHD without it being a bad addiction. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that.
Okay, so let's say that you have made the decision to get sober. What happens next? And it's a pretty challenging deal. Back to the dopamine issue. I remember, being in high school and being even like the youngest kid, feeling incredibly itchy, like uncomfortable all the time, uncomfortable in social situations, just like looking at other people, like, how do they all know how to talk to each other? And, how do you make friendships? How do you do this thing? And whether it was anxiety or, alcoholism or ADHD, it's hard to know, but I do know that the first time I took a drink, I felt so much better. Like my shoulders came down. I felt like I could talk to people. I didn't feel like I was this, you guys can't see me, but I'm like 6 feet tall and I don't play any sports. And so I was like this freakishly tall girl who had a boy's name, so I was already like set up for a lot of discomfort. But whenever I was drinking, I felt like I could talk to anybody. I felt smarter, shorter, prettier, all the things, and so it was really hard to give that up. But I finally got sick and tired of being kind of sick and tired. I have to admit, a lot of the drinking days were fun. But at the end, it wasn't fun. And if you'll do the math, I was not one who got sober before I had kids. My oldest was 9 when I got sober, and I had a 7-year-old, and I had a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I would give anything to have gotten sober before I had kids, but I didn't. But that's part of my journey and part of my story. And I share that because I'm sure there's other people out there who have kids who are concerned that they may be addicted to something or maybe abusing a substance. And I want you to know that happens and you can get better. So now what? You decided to get sober. Maybe you know you have ADHD, maybe you don't. But go ahead and go. Oh, is that the next one? Yep, that's the next one. Okay. If you have already been diagnosed with ADHD and you're getting sober, it's important to know how your ADHD shows up and how that impacts your sobriety. So a lot of my ADHD is still impulse control. So, it was very easy for me to go from drinking alcohol to shopping, and I was already shopping anyway. Speeding. I had lots of speeding tickets. Let's see what else. Exercise. There was a time, believe it or not, where I used to exercise all the time. That happens actually quite a bit when people get out of treatment or are early in recovery. They kind of replace one thing with another. And so it was important for me to understand exactly how my ADHD overlapped with my recovery so that I could recognize if I was getting into bad habits. I'm addicted to puzzles, like Chris is addicted to yarn. And my husband gets upset with my puzzles also. And I tell him that this is way better than me drinking a bottle of wine in the garage every night. So he shuts up usually. But, the scary thing, I think, for a lot of people is that, if you have ADHD and you're in recovery, the treatment is still, stimulant medication or some kind of medication and cognitive behavioral therapy or executive function coaching for your ADHD. And so, it seems like it's counterintuitive that you would take medication, stimulant medication, if you're a person who has struggled with an addiction to a substance, but that is actually the first line treatment. And in fact, there's lots of new studies that are showing that people who are going to treatment centers, like 30-day programs to get sober, who have ADHD, they're starting stimulant medication early on because it actually helps your brain recover faster from the brain fog associated with getting sober. It takes up to 1.5 years for our brains to kind of return to baseline when we've been, using or abusing substances. And if you are an individual with ADHD and you're going into recovery, starting stimulant medication sooner actually helps your brain return to baseline or neurotypical-ish, whatever your baseline is, a little quicker. Now, if you are choosing to take stimulant medications, they recommend that you only take long acting, no short acting. And sometimes people with ADHD and substance use disorder need higher doses, and it can be challenging to find prescribers who are well-versed in addiction or medication-assisted treatment and therapies, but they're definitely out there. And so definitely look up people, talk to your CHADD resources, talk to people in recovery, and usually you can find someone who will support you. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. Okay, so for me, medication is part of my journey. I've always been a rapid metabolizer, so I have to take, and I have 5 kids, so my day doesn't end until 10 o'clock at night. And so I've always had to take a higher dose, but I've always been on long-acting medication. I take other medications as well for different things, but that's always been a part of my journey, and I've been to, well, we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but, depending on your course of recovery, some programs are funny about medications or outside issues or things like that. I've been really fortunate that, the program that I'm in, a sponsor said, are you willing to, at some point in your life, try to go without medication? And I'm like, sure, when I'm 90 years old, I'm willing to give it a shot for like a day. And she's like, good enough, here we go. But even that I think is, a little too intrusive. I think there's lots of groups out there that recognize, and even AA in 12-step programs recognize that, if you have something that's prescribed to you by a doctor to address a condition and you need to take it, then you need to take it. And it doesn't at all interact with your work in a 12-step program. There's lots of non-stimulant medication options out there too. Stimulant medication is not the only option, but it is the best option. And there's lots of studies that seem to show that, again, it's highly effective for people who have ADHD. It's also effective for our kids. Even more studies now showing that if your child has ADHD, and I have 5 of them, like I said, 4 of them have ADHD, and we talk to them all about, the risks of being a child of of someone who has ADHD and addiction. And they sat there and told us that the doctor said, you know, all the studies are showing that if we start your kid on ADHD medication now, chances are they're not going to struggle with addiction later in life, or at least they're not going to have a more increased risk of struggling with addiction. And I would give anything for my kids to not have to go through what I went through. So I was like, sign them up. So that's my 2 cents on that. Chris, you're up with exercise.
So I will tell you right now, I think I'm probably the only one on here. I don't know. I do not medicate, but I medicate in other ways, like caffeine. And I have tried medications, and it was much earlier in finding out about my ADHD. And I know I'm not opposed to trying medications, but as
Okay, so Chris froze. She's going to try to join again.
I'll jump in.
Go
and
for it.
Talk a little bit about support groups. So a lot of the tools that we find in recovery often have a community component. And as a peer support specialist, I think it wasn't my first, AA was not my first foray into like group things, but I found it very valuable. And so I think that's one of the first options is 12-step groups like AA or NA. These groups really offer a structured way of support and a sense of community that can be really incredibly comforting to people. And for those of us with ADHD, because some of us really like structure, some of us don't, you know, there are other options out there. So, you know, as Jeremy was talking about AA and taking medication, my experience with AA was AA really supported me. And then when I discovered that I had ADHD, I had a sponsor that was like, oh, you're going to take medication? You shouldn't be in AA anymore. And that's not true, by the way, just so you all know, that's not true. Like Jeremy said, if you're prescribed medication and everything out there, I did a lot of research even at what was available at the time, and continue taking medication and being medicated is one of the best ways to ensure that you don't relapse. So that was my experience in AA. And then I moved on to Smart Recovery, which is another fantastic option for people. And it focuses more on self-empowerment and uses tools from cognitive behavioral therapy. And so it's a little bit more science-based than AA, and can be another really good option. And then there's Sober Companions, which they provide one-on-one support and can help you navigate situations. Often they have their peer support people, so they've been through recovery. I like to say they're kind of like personal coaches who can like offer you advice and guidance and help you navigate through different situations. And then there's groups like Recovery Dharma, Refuge Recovery, and groups like my CHADD chapter runs a group specifically for people that have ADHD and are in recovery from something, because as we all know, and as everybody said, you know, it's not just alcohol. It can be so many different things that we're addicted to. So.
Okay, I
Okay.
changed my microphone. Is that, I don't know if it's any better.
Wait,
Oh, Chris,
is
do you
it
wanna go back?
Tonya or? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm gonna go into exercise, activities, and hobbies, because for me that was what literally got me through before I found out about my ADHD. But like what Suzanne, well, what everybody has already said too. There were people that told me that I was addicted to exercise. So addictions can be, it's when you take something, even if it's good for you, a bit too far, right? And so exercise is always good. Being outside, being with nature. I'm just sitting here kind of staring out the window, and I don't have my glasses on, and I just don't even care because I can still see nature, and that works really well for me. As a teacher, I know it's not popular, but I do it anyway. I take the kids outside, because even just sometimes being able to go outside just for 5 minutes is a huge thing. Breaks in your schedule, getting up and moving, brain breaks are huge. I'm not a tapper. And so I feel like I have to sit still. So I always give everybody a break in class. That activity, let's go to the bathroom. Everybody, we're going to the bathroom. That, like, I can have a block hour, you know, an 84-minute block class. We take a bathroom break in the middle. I have a new class of kids after the break because they are ready to re-engage. I don't have the disengagement that other people do when they're trying to do the whole bell to bell teaching. And then hobbies. Hobbies too can become addiction. And Jeremy, Suzanne, and Tonya have all received hand knit things by me because I have a problem. And I learned how to knit right before COVID. So it's not been that long, but that has really been my lifeline. And it was fun at the last CHADD or the last conference in Baltimore. There was an entire session on the meditative qualities of knitting, and it's true. I have kids that come in my room, and I teach them how to knit. We talk about other things that they can do as their hobbies. You know, when I first got sober, everyone received, I don't know if you guys, you know, the little blankets that are made out of fleece, then you cut the corners and then cut all the tabs. Yeah, everybody got one of those, right? Everybody. You know, my poor son was in kindergarten and he's like, are you making another one? And I'm like, yeah, who are you going to give it to? I don't know, but somebody, because I had to do something. So just kind of the importance of hearing or trying different things, and it changes over time. So sobriety is never one size fits all. What works one day may or may not work the next. And as you progress through your sobriety and learning more about you and how your ADHD works, you can try some different things and go from there. All right, sorry about deucing out. I didn't mean to. This is now Tonya.
All right. So certainly for getting sober, that can include both inpatient treatment and outpatient treatment. There are many options for that. One of the great things that I think you see more common is that there's not just, it used to be that there was like mental health inpatient treatment and then substance use inpatient treatment, and now they have more kind of dual diagnosis, or you know, where they're treating both or multiple things at once. So there are a lot of intensive outpatient programs, and so there's, you know, I think a lot of times people think that they have to kind of go far away to go to some 30-day treatment facility, and that isn't necessarily the truth. I mean, certainly that is an option for some people, but there's a lot of communities that have, you know, intensive outpatient or just outpatient groups that people can do while they're still trying to, you know, live at home and carry on their daily life. And so there's a lot of different options for that. And I think it's important, you know, I personally didn't go to inpatient recovery. I definitely needed it. I should have gone, but I did not. But I think it's something that can be very valuable.
Okay, so another thing that turns people off about some 12-step programs is this whole higher power thing. You know, it's really God-based, and you know, people, you know, say you have to have God or find God, and And I hate that happens because I don't know how I got so lucky. I live in Kansas City, which, you know, is in the middle of the country and is often a little bit behind the times. But for whatever reason, the meetings that I was fortunate enough to go to early in recovery were peopled by individuals who said, you know what, all you have to do is believe that, you know, something outside yourself can help you in some way. You don't have to believe in a higher power. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to believe in anything. If you believe that, you know, this individual next to you may know a little bit more about, you know, recovery than you do, then that's all you need to be here. And, you know, there are a lot of people who are, you know, very faith-based and faith-filled. There's meetings that are very, you know, God-focused. And like I said in the chat, you know, there's so many, one of the great things about COVID was that, you know, all the AA meetings and 12-step recovery meetings went online. And so you could literally attend a meeting anytime, you know, in like Australia, I mean, all over the world. There's so many options out there. If you're in a meeting and you don't like what you're hearing, find a different one, because that's not the way it's supposed to be. You know, you're supposed to feel welcomed and supported, and you know, the God stuff and the medication stuff and all that just messes up the message, and it's not accurate. It's not truly what at its core the AA traditions and principles believe. And we're not here to push AA or any 12-step program. I'm just sharing kind of what my experience has been, and some of the reasons why people choose not to experience 12-step programs. But there are other options out there. Go ahead, Chris.
So I want to kind of pony up on what Jeremy just said. I have a sponsee right now that struggles so much with this whole higher power and the God thing. And so I created a long time ago. I've not had that experience personally, but I told her, I'm like, well, God it could be an acronym for great outdoor deity. And that like clicked for her. And she was like, oh, I can do this now. And I'm like, yeah, that's like, you have to find what works for you, which leads me to my section on wellness. You know, my journey has taken me through different myriad of things. And for me, you know, like the meditation, just walking in nature, tree bathing, it can be yoga, it can be Pilates, it can be whatever it is that you want. It's being conscientious of what you put into your body. You know, I still like to eat a lot. But I also love walking. You know, I used to live in Seattle. My son was born here. And so I've been showing Jeremy around, and you know, it's like I was so proud of myself because I made it to Gasworks Park without GPS today. Woo-hoo! Yeah, from downtown. And then I got to Shore of the Troll when I lived over in Fremont before it was gentrified, and it was still really weird. But these are the things, like being here and coming and seeing and doing things. You have to know what is best for your specific kind of wellness. And sometimes it takes a little time to get to know, and it changes over time. As I've gotten older, there are certain things that I recognize that, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not going to go run a marathon again. I was a one and done. But I'd walk maybe a half marathon. So, you know, you kind of adjust different things. I probably made Jeremy walk a half marathon in the last couple of days. So there's that. All right, Tonya.
So as we've mentioned here, it is important that we find our own paths, which can be very windy. There have been times where, although I've had continuous sobriety for almost 30 years, it does not mean I've had continuous sanity throughout that time. There's been times where I have stepped away from AA for a while, as I sorted through my own journey. There's been times where I've really leaned on friends and
and, you know, going into spiritual readings and things like that. And then of course, psychology. And I worked at some substance abuse treatment centers for a while too, which was super helpful. So, you know, but I had to find what worked for me. I had to come back and find what that was all gonna, because there's certainly, I don't agree with everything, like that AA does. And, which it's not, you know, like there's plenty of people in the program that, you know, don't speak on AA's behalf. So just know that. But, you know, again, finding your own way and what works for you. And for me, that also does include taking medication, and also, you know, attending a support, a 12-step support system and having a tight knit, community of women and that are sober, and also, you know, my sober AAers and or my sober ADHDers, and it just, you know, which Suzanne's going to talk more about too.
Yeah, so most of the tools, like I had said on the last slide, most of the tools in recovery include some kind of component or recommend some kind of component of community. And there are so many ways to find peer support and an accountability component for yourself. I think that those of us with ADHD really need external reinforcement much more than our neurotypical peeps. I like to explain it by Russell Barkley talks about this concept of ADHD being a challenge of conscientiousness. So it's like we know what we need to do or what we want to do, but we can't do it. And so for me, I tried to get sober a long time by myself. It was just, you know, I kept trying and failing and trying and failing. And it wasn't until I found a community that was like, hey, how's it going? You know, call me when there's a problem or call me when there's not a problem and you just think there might be a problem. And that really was a turning point for me. And I see that with so many people that I work with. Through my own work, that having a sense of community, having someone or some people that you're accountable to can be really important. So building that deep support network just really does reinforce sobriety and good habits. So.
I'm just gonna let you read the slide because I think it says it all. No, that's like my favorite saying in sobriety. Life is gonna happen. You're gonna encounter speed bumps, sometimes speed mountains, and that's just life. But it's, oh my God, it sucks so much better sober. And so finding the joy, you can always find something positive. I know that that's a very Pollyanna-ish thing to say, but I really do think that you do find something positive in knowing that, you know what, I made it through today sober, right? I'm traveling again. I'm a huge traveler, and I was very afraid of traveling the first few years of sobriety because getting on an airplane, yeah, you know, yeah, you just like, but it's happening, and it's so much fun. So find the joy where you are. Like sobriety does not have to be this like dun, dun, dun. It can be a lot of fun, and I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a lot of fun, all four of us together. So
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more. I feel like we've already touched on this a little bit, but sobriety and neurodiversity and the overlap there. Go ahead. And again, you know, we've touched on this stuff already. You know, you find the thing that works for you, you know, whether it's medication, whether you decide to take medication or not, this whole spirituality thing, you know, if it works for you, awesome. You know, mindfulness and meditation, those are great ways to treat your ADHD. And it also helps with recovery. Same with the health stuff, you know, food, exercise, sleep, caffeine, boundaries. Boundaries are important. You know, just because people are in recovery doesn't mean that they're healthy individuals. So, you know, definitely make sure you have your boundaries up. And then also, you know, with ADHD too, we are awesome at oversharing, you know, and that's part of the way that we connect with other people. But you know, like on the cab ride here from the airport, you know, now I'm best friends with the cab driver, and you know, and he's like showing me pictures of his son's wedding, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And we're really good at connecting with people, but not everybody we connect with may be the healthiest person or someone who has our best interests at heart. And so, you know, you don't want to shut down or you know, put what do you call it, a bushel or a barrel over your light. You want to keep your light shining, but also, you know, have boundaries like a MF. And so anyway, guys, you have anything to add on that slide? Nope. Okay. On we go.
All right, challenges in sobriety. So the reality is a lot of us, before we get sober, we think, oh, if I could just get sober, my life would be perfect. And I am here to tell you that life does not magically get perfect when you get sober. Once I got sober, I faced infertility, 2 parents having cancer, big issues with my kiddo, health scares for my husband and I had to do it all sober. And so there's this part of you that, you know, in the beginning is like, oh, but I used to reach for the alcohol. So what am I going to do now? But overall, let me just tell you that managing these challenges that come up in life sober is so much easier than managing them when you're not sober. And it's just, there's always going to be setbacks. And the truth is, whether they're big or they're small, that those are the challenges that can lead to relapse. So it's like, how do we deal with this? How do we stay on track when life gives us curveballs? And I would say that one of the best ways is to plan for there to be curveballs. So those of us with ADHD have to be really purposeful about our sobriety. We have to plan to feel like not going to meetings. We have to plan to feel like not taking a drink. You know, we just can't leave things to chance. And I don't know if that's true. I haven't been an alcoholic and neurotypical, so I don't know if that's what it's like for neurotypical people, but for us, we have to be really purposeful and plan. And then when we have life challenges, we have to be flexible and we have to adapt, which is really also hard for those of us with ADHD. And then ADHD tends to flare during transitions. And these are the transitions that make it really challenging to stay sober too. So there's any time, like, you know, you're looking at marriage, parenting, divorce, like all those things, going to college, like those transitions make our ADHD harder to manage. And so if we're in recovery, it makes relapse more likely. And so, you know, the things that have worked for me are journaling regularly. Again, it's getting that noise in your head about your sobriety and about your recovery. It's getting it out of your head and on paper so you can see it and witness it. And checking in with ourselves regularly, as well as, you know, if you're in AA, get yourself a sponsor. If you're not in AA, find peer support somewhere, get a peer support specialist, or a trusted friend. Some people talk to their clergy. You know, there's a lot of different ways and places that you can find to support yourself. One of the things for me is just getting involved with CHADD. I have developed a group of friends that you know, obviously I'm open about everything. I'm open about my recovery and stuff like that, but people know. And so, you know, we check in on each other, and that makes a huge difference. And when our programs aren't working, then we need to recalibrate them. And that means like just taking a look at what you're doing and seeing, like, could I be more proactive? Could I be more flexible? Where else can I seek support? So that no matter what life kind of throws your way, you kind of know how to navigate yourself back to that true north of really managing your addiction. Oh, this one's me too. Okay, so as I was alluding to, there are lots of things that can cause us to relapse. And relapse is not a dirty word. I think somebody once told me that the difference between the definition of happiness, or the equation of happiness, is the difference between your expectations and reality. And so I think when I first got sober, I was really under the impression that to be a good girl, that I was never going to relapse, that was just something that was not, I was just not going to let it happen, because I was going to be really good at this like sobriety thing. And relapse happens. It just does. And I looked up the statistics. 40 to 60% of those of us that are battling addiction do relapse. So that's, that's more than 50, it can be more than 50%. But, it's interesting because I think I've noticed as my dad passed away last year, and I've noticed in that grieving process that death is something we don't like to talk about. And I feel like relapse, it occurred to me today that relapse is a lot like death. It's like, we don't want to talk about it. We don't practice how to handle it. And so those of us with ADHD need to be aware of the fact that relapse is normal, and we need to have a plan in place proactively for how we're going to address it when and if it happens. So that, because one of the biggest things that will screw up your recovery of any addiction is shame. And when we relapse, shame is so big that it's what causes people to keep going down that path, instead of saying, oh, whoops, I relapsed. Let me get back onto what I was doing. So the question is, like, how can we prevent this? Recovery is a journey. It's really important to be patient with yourself and understand, like I was saying, getting out of your head so you can see your triggers. Being aware of your triggers will really help you. I'm not going to name names, but sometimes when someone comes to visit me, and it's been like this for years, I can find myself getting more anxious. And like Jeremy said, man, the first time I took a drink, it was like, and I was 6, by the way, it just relaxed me. And I was like, oh, this is what normal people feel like. And so it's important for us to basically, be aware of the things that trigger us and the people that trigger us and all those things, and really being proactive in our care. So educating ourselves on our ADHD, talk therapy, CBT, ACT therapy, and working through the shame and the guilt that we have just in general. I think a lot of us carry, when we get sober, that shame with us. And it can make the process of recovery a lot harder than it has to be if we carry that shame. So I think that is everything. Working on overcoming shame is really important. And again, find your community and remember that every step forward, no matter how small it is, even if you fall back a little bit, is really a recovery worth celebrating, because little by little, your life can change. And that has been my experience. It wasn't like, oh, I'm doing this thing and tomorrow it's going to be amazing. It's like little steps along the way.
So, for me, I think there was a message in here, or note in the chat about parenting small children and trying to balance that with ADHD, and then, trying to find time to, do all the things you have to for your self-care and sobriety. And I can tell you, I did not do that gracefully at all. In fact, when my kids were younger, I did not make nearly as much time for my sobriety. And in the time management, I mean, and back then we didn't have, way back then, there weren't, I know there's some, like here in this, you know, like in the Kansas City area where I live, I know there's some meetings where they have childcare, but I got sober in a smaller community where that wasn't a thing, and the meetings were at 8 o'clock at night. Well, that's, you know, bedtime for kids, and so there weren't online meetings and things like that. So you know, that's, again, I can tell you what didn't work, but Eric had posted a question about what the motivation to persist and keep going on the road to recovery. And I can honestly say it has been my children. I am, you know, my father died of alcoholism when I was 19 years sober. And I wanted to give my kids something different. And although they've never seen me drink, they are very aware of alcoholism and sobriety. And again, they know what seeing me be crazy looks like. So they like when I go to meetings and take care of myself, because they don't like the crazy mom that happens. So I have to make the time. And so interestingly, my husband is also sober, and he's one
that is like, oh, you don't show up to meetings late and you stay all the way. But for years, I came in late, left early, because if that was the only amount of time I had to make a meeting. So I had to do what worked, because that's what I needed. And now I have an empty nest, and I can go and spend more time there, and I don't have to rush as often. But that's what I had to do at that stage of life. And I still struggle, even though I don't have kids at home, I still struggle with trying to make time to fit everything in. And honestly, it is really hard for me to go to meetings where I have to just sit there and try to, kind of mask, or try to, I like it when they have swivelly chairs, but not all places do. So I like to draw or other things, but I mean, sometimes that will be a deterrent for me. I'm like, I don't want to go and just sit there and have to sit, and because that's so hard for me. And I'm not good at prioritizing and making I was so proud of myself that I reached out and asked Jeremy to lunch, because usually she asked me to go to lunch. And because I'm not good at remembering, even though I want to go to lunch, and but trying to make the time for it, and planning ahead, because I can't just be like, hey, can you go to lunch right now? Because I don't know if you heard, she's got a lot of kids, so and now puppies. So anyway, Chris, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I struggle a lot with the time blindness. I will have a task that I don't want to do, like clean. And so that I will do everything I can to not have to clean. And so I have to really use my time very wisely. I took my son, he was in kindergarten when I got sober. So I took him to meetings, much to the chagrin of my parents. But that brings you to the energy management. Boundaries are really good. I too lost my dad last year, but it's a very different situation than with Suzanne. Like I said before, I'm not super fidgety, but I'm making progress on my cardigan. So, it's learning how to do those things so that I can focus. The first few times I started taking the knitting to faculty meetings in particular, or my AA meetings, I have to do this, or else I'm not going to pay attention. my very first meeting, I literally counted posters on a wall. I read every single slogan. I did everything I could so I could, I didn't want to be there. Now I do. And I just sit back and I'm like, okay, this is an hour of peace for me. And that's a priority for me. So.
I know we're getting tight on time, so I will kind of blow through these. A lot of times I have clients ask me these questions, when they've either been diagnosed with ADHD or they're newly sober. If I really have ADHD, does that mean that I'm not actually an alcoholic or I'm not addicted to something, because I actually just had ADHD? Well, unfortunately, by the time that you've, crossed that line into substance use disorder, yeah, you're definitely still someone who's struggling with addiction. I mean, ADHD is genetic and so is addiction. And it would be great if we had all gotten diagnosed with ADHD and treated when we were young kids, but we didn't. And so, now we get to do both. We get to work on our ADHD and be in recovery. We talked a little bit earlier about, how you find medication if you are an individual with ADHD who's also in recovery. It's really up to you. I mean, I've seen all kinds of different options. I'm fortunate that, because I am plugged into the ADHD community in Kansas City, I know which prescribers are out there that are recovery friendly. My prescribers do know that I'm in recovery. That's just the way that I had to do it. But I've never, ever misused my ADHD medication. I've always taken it as prescribed. With the medication shortage lately, I have experienced a lot more pharmacists who think I'm drug seeking because we've got a lot of stimulants running through our household. And that's very frustrating. And usually I take the opportunity to provide them with some psychoeducation. They don't always appreciate the psychoeducation, but there's lots of Walgreens and we can always switch to a different one if we need to. Let's see, I think my ADHD-like symptoms may actually come from withdrawal and brain challenges. There's a post-acute withdrawal syndrome that happens to some people. And we talked earlier about how when people are just getting sober or kind of detoxing, it can look like they have ADHD. And there's all kinds of different guidelines about whether or not you assess someone for ADHD when they're new in recovery or newly sober. And so, however your particular physician goes about it is probably okay, but there's just as many things that say that you can assess people for ADHD when they're, newly out of detox. And a lot of people do get diagnosed for the first time when they go to treatment. And also when they go to jail, which is not nearly as fun. And so, encouraging everybody to, if you think they have a problem, to get diagnosed or to seek treatment is a fabulous thing. We touched on these two earlier too. If your sponsor's telling you things like you can't take ADHD medication and be in recovery, or if you're not really sober, if you're taking any kind of medication, find a new sponsor and find a new group because that's not accurate.
So just like our recovery evolves, so does our treatment for our ADHD. And this is because our ADHD and our addiction is really impacted by what's going on in our lives. And both things are things that have to be managed for our entire life. It's just the way that it is. So it's important to be flexible and proactive and purposeful about how we address our ADHD and our addiction issues. And then just remember that your program is yours. It's as unique as you are. And what works for you might be really different than what works for your peers. And that's okay. You have to follow your truth in your heart and go with what works for you. Whoops, I went the wrong way. So we wanted to share some resources where you can learn more about ADHD and addiction. These are just some. There are probably more out there. You can find out about all of these by looking them up on the internet. And our contact information, which is also on that page too. All right. Thank you guys all so much. It was such a pleasure to share this information with you tonight. Beth, how do you like to do the QA?
Yeah, so our official end time is 8:30, but we all have ADHD and we love these topics, and this has been a really good one. So we tend to go a little bit over if you guys have the time. And I know, Tonya, you're a couple of hours ahead of us, so I don't want to take advantage, but typically what we'll do is, go back, look for any questions that have been in the chat. We ask everybody to ask their questions in the chat so that we can kind of orderly take them one at a time. And so that's where we can start. I think Eric wins coming the furthest, although unlike Jeremy and Chris, he did not come to Seattle tonight. But he is in Florida, so we'll go to his question. And even though I know he'll be the last one on the call anyway, it doesn't matter that he's 3 hours ahead. When the opportunity arises, would each of you four comment on how you each found the motivation to persist and keep on going on the road to recovery towards finding a new positive and more healthy way of life? What was it that made a difference?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. For me, it was my family. I have, like, I don't know if I mentioned, but my husband I have known since I was 12 years old. We didn't start dating then. We didn't get together until we were 19. But we have always been best friends, and going through the worst part of my addiction, I would promise him every single time that I was going to stop, and then I would do it again, and I would feel so much shame and so horrible about myself. And he was so understanding for so long. And there was one night where he said to me, "You know what? I mean, we were young," and he said, we just moved to Los Angeles, expensive. And he was like, "We don't have the money to get divorced. So we have to stay together and live together in this townhouse. But I think I'm going to move into another bedroom and we're going to be roommates." And that, not what he said, but looking at him and seeing in his eyes that he was done. He was done with me, saying one thing and doing something else, and telling him I'd be home at a certain time and not being there. And I just saw that he was done. And that was, I think it was like that. It was a morning before I left for work. And that afternoon, that evening, I found my way to my first AA meeting. And that drink I took before he had that conversation with me was the last drink I took. And I wanted kids, and he was like, "No way, not the way things are going." And so I knew that if I wanted a different life, that I was going to have to change something. And so whenever I didn't feel like going to meetings, I thought about what his face looked like in that moment and what I would be giving up. And so that's what keeps me motivated, and still does. Yeah. And my son now too. So
I was a single mom. My son was in kindergarten when I got sober. And drinking was a lot of fun for a lot of years. I mean, when I lived in Seattle, my entire territory was Lake Union to the International District, from the pier to Madison Park. I mean, I had a really nice area and I sold wine. Come on now. Yeah, I mean, I was paid to drink, people, paid to drink. And I chose that job intentionally. And then I had my son, and I ended up back in Wichita, which is where I live, Wichita, Kansas. And, the depression set in. And it was either suicide or rehab, basically, because I was going to drink myself to death. And I didn't know if I really wanted to do that to my son, but I knew I had to try something. And then to stay sober, I'm not even going to lie. A lot of the reason I stay sober was basically just to show my parents, ha 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 ha, because I have a very contentious relationship. Well, I had a contentious relationship with my mom and dad, and now with my mom, it's very interesting. My son went on, and I knew that he has more of a problem with my ADHD than he does with me being an alcoholic, which is, interesting in a lot of ways. But my kid went to Yale for free. I had to have I had to make a choice, and I made it, and I'm proud of that. I didn't go back and get my doctorate until I was 50. I mean, why do I have a doctorate in educational psychology? I teach baking and pastry, people. Why? Because I have ADHD. That's why. That's why we do things that people don't always understand, and that's okay. But I go to at least one meeting completely regularly, come hell or high water, unless I'm out of town. And then in the summer or on school breaks, I show up at the meeting that I got sober in. It's like what Jeremy said, I go to meetings on Zoom sometimes, or, whenever I'm out of town.
I hesitate to say that I got sober from my family or my kids, because I firmly believe that alcoholism is a disease. And I know all kinds of people, including myself, who had lots of really good reasons to stay sober or to stop drinking and couldn't. I had 4 young kids. I had a husband who loved me. I still had my job. I had never got a DUI, but my sister spent 10 years in jail after hitting someone while driving drunk. And, you'd think that would be enough for me to get sober, but it wasn't. And so, I don't know that I could identify one thing. I think I just truly was shocked when I finally tried to stop, because I was convinced that I could stop and I didn't need any help to stop. And then I couldn't. There were mornings when I'd wake up and be like, I'm not going to drink today. And then on the way home from work, I'd stop by the liquor store and I didn't even want to be drinking, and I was still drinking. And I did not like that I couldn't do it myself, because I'd been successful at everything I had done. I mean, not everything, but I had a husband who loved me. I had a great job. I had 4 fabulous kids at the time. I graduated from college. I had all these great things that I had done, through my own initiative. And to discover that there was something that I couldn't do on my own was shocking to me. And so I had to get control of it. And so I know that sounds like selfish and self-centered, but it's what worked, And so once I did get sober, I did not want to go back to that, and I saw how much better my life was sober. And I was able to, be fully present and do things for the first time that I had never done sober before. And life was so much better. And the last thing I ever wanted to do was to go back to the way that was. I don't want to experience that ever again. So I guess that's been the motivation, kind of that also fear of failure. The first year that I was out of treatment, they told us that people who go to aftercare for a year are more likely to stay sober. And so I was like, well, I'm going to do that, because I'm competitive. So I'm going to win this recovery thing. And shockingly, you don't get like a prize or anything, but you get to have your life back. You get to keep your house. You get to keep your kids. You get to keep your husband. You get to keep your job. You get to keep your car. You get to keep your driver's license, or you get to get it all back if you lost it. And so I've just been incredibly, incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by, people in recovery. Like I said, both my parents were sober. When they died, my dad did go back out again. My brother's now in recovery. My sister unfortunately died, ultimately as a result of her addiction. But, I've just been very, very, I hate to say blessed, but I've been really, 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 really fortunate. And it's just an honor to be a part of this program, and an honor to be able to talk about ADHD and how it impacts us. Because if there's one person that we can get diagnosed sooner rather than later, so they don't have to go through what we went through, that would be huge. I will say it's interesting having to deal with your adult children drinking. That's one thing I've not been prepared for, and that's been challenging. But I get to go to Al-Anon now if I want to and learn about that. So not the kids with ADHD, the kid that doesn't have ADHD.
Thank you all for your answers. It's very impressive and motivational. Thank you, all of you tonight, and just now with my question, and for this night. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Eric.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Beth.
You're muted, Beth.
Nobody's ever complained about that before. Okay, so Grace says, do you find there are benefits to having ADHD?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can hyper focus like all day long. I mean, when I'm interested in something, I can also be incredibly annoying and ask a ton of questions. So for me, like, I think there are definite benefits to it. I'll talk to anybody like Jeremy. It's like I'm best friends with the last Uber driver that I had. I have recommended CHADD to him for his ADHD kiddo, and I've heard about his son with his adult son with autism and like talked about that. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's just like anything in life. It's like there's trade-offs to it. There are some things that I know I would not be able to do without my ADHD, like hyper focusing, like being really passionate about things. But there's a flip side too. Like I'm really demand avoidant. Like I don't like talking on the phone to people. So I don't know. I think it's a trade-off. Yeah.
So I just had a boo-boo because I'm trying something new and I didn't bring a laptop. I brought an iPad. I'm learning. These are not things I should do. And I just like spilt my tea and, because proprioception. Oh yeah. And oh Beth, I can't wait to like talk to you about RSD. Oh yeah. But I have proprioception issues. I have some other things that are a challenge, but you know what? ADHD is my superpower. And on my very first day of class, every semester, because I teach a semester class, sorry, I'm trying to I basically knocked everything over. I tell my kids I've got ADHD and they're like, "Oh, dude, me too." And I'm like, "Right on." And then if they change their meds or whatever, then they let me know. So I'm the only one that knows why they're being weird at school. But it's so helpful. And then if they know, I'm like, "Guys, you can't click your pin. That's going to really annoy me. Don't do it. Don't do it." And they really they accept me as I am, and I'm able to accept them as they are. And I'm hoping that as the teacher, they know that I'm not just a teacher, but I'm really their school mom, and that I'm there for them, but I'm going to guide and kind of protect them. So I work really hard when I, have kids that are having some issues that that I'm there. So I love having ADHD. And again, like I said, my son thinks it's better for me to have being an alcoholic than having ADHD, which I find amusing.
Any others? I can go on to the next question. I think Grace, we can talk all night. Like any of us would be thrilled to talk all night long about why we love our ADHD. It's pretty crazy, but when you get to that point, it ends up where the benefits so clearly outweigh the challenges, and you can show up every day in a way that other people see your benefits as outweighing your challenges. Whereas before, when I was just like a scared mess all the time, so afraid, people pleasing, bending over, pretzeling myself to people please. Like, I had to work so hard to make it so that my strengths could just come up to the bare top of being late and losing things and scattered and not coming home on time and all of those things, right? And I had no idea why all those things were happening, so it just compounded, and it made sense to me why people were frustrated with me. Now I know why, and it takes off this emotional labor backpack that I don't have to carry anymore. And it makes it so that, yeah, I screw up a lot, but I can let it go, move on, and, you know, hang out with this group who really just honestly likes me for the way I am. And that's a first in my life. So, I wanted to get to Jennifer's question because it's, like I said, we can talk all night long about why we love ADHD. Jennifer's question's a tough one because I have adult kids and in their 30s, and it's hard, whether, no matter what's going on in their life, everybody's always in denial about something. So, panel, Jennifer's question is, how do you help a young adult kid, or I guess an old kid who's an adult, who's in denial about, you know, their addiction or their addictive behaviors? Or maybe what would have helped you when you were that age?
I put an answer in that chat, and it was for me, it was having to learn how to change my perspective, right? I can be like, oh my God, I have an ADHD diagnosis and I'm an alcoholic, and you know, I can do that. I can. Or I can be like, holy shit, look at all the stuff I can do. You know, I do not clean well, and unfortunately, I think my husband is on the spectrum and has OCD, and so it's an interesting mix, you know. But that's why I encourage all my students. I have sent my son numerous links to articles so that he could learn more about ADHD. While he is not a teacher by trade, that's what he's doing currently, and is actually looking at doing some more. And he came back to Wichita just for about 6 months and was a substitute teacher, and his favorite classes were the ones that were the kids that were all the neurodiverse kids, because he now understands, right? That's a superpower right there. That empathy that we have, that Jeremy was talking about, we understand where people are coming from like no others, oftentimes. So, you know, we have so many things to offer, but having that shift in the mindset is really hard, but just keep encouraging it. And, you know, your maladaptive behaviors can be changed too. And we had to do that, you know. You know, the knitting thing, you know, I don't know, I might start an Etsy store, who knows? But in the meantime, I'm able to, you know, do Jeremy's over there laughing at me. She's like, ooh, but you know, I know one stitch and I can only do straight things, but then I hand sew. So you know, it's crazy, but I see things, and I can't read a pattern, a knitting pattern. I can't do a lot of things, right? But it's not that I can't, it's that I choose, I don't want to learn. And that's now that I made that realization, but I can see it and I can figure it out on my own and do it my way. And that's what I would suggest with your adult kiddo. Tonya's sleepy. probably. Yes, it's very late.
Let's see, any must reads or podcasts that you recommend as first timers navigating ADHD?
Well, CHADD has one, so definitely check that out.
We have lots actually.
Yeah.
ADHD 365. Yep.
Yeah.
Impact Parents. Sorry, Impact Parents. It has great podcasts.
Yes.
There's lots of other good ones.
So Grace, one thing that I recommend, it's not a podcast. I mean, let me tell you, I have hoovered up all the ADHD podcasts in, rapid hyperactive form over the last 5 years and listened to them several times. But one of the ones that made it so that I didn't have to go back and ever reread, re-listen, re-look at is Jessica McCabe's How to ADHD. She has a YouTube channel, I don't know, 1 million freaking gazillion followers. She's amazing. She's here in Seattle. She's an absolute kindest, neatest, relatable rock star. And she, like us, she was diagnosed, I think, in her 30s. So according to people in their 30s, she was late diagnosed. Not that it's a competition for others who are older. But she just wrote a book called How to ADHD. And that, I don't read much, and I have a ton of books that I've never cracked open, and I've read her book. It is easy to read. It's thick. It's kind of off-putting, but it's published by like a big publisher, but the print's large. It reads like she speaks. So you can pick up that book halfway through chapter 6 and read halfway down on the right-hand side page, and that might be all you need, and it's awesome. So I better send her a bill, but she's great. Russell Barkley, absolutely. Thank you, Suzanne. So my obsession, like I said earlier, is RSD. And so if anybody's interested in ADHD, emotionality, because it's what led me to an ADHD diagnosis. And I had no idea that the strong emotions had anything to do with ADHD. And so what really kind of was my gateway to understanding was Attitude Magazine and Dr. William Bill Dodson. And for me, searching on anything that says William Dodson, Attitude Magazine, RSD, will tell you so much. I always recommend his podcast, or the Attitude Magazine podcast, episode number 114. Funny that I haven't memorized, but yes. It's called something like Treatment Mistakes Doctors Make, or something like that. And it's like a 45-minute awesome webinar, but the Q&A is also 45 minutes and more awesome than the webinar. Jennifer, awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Perfect. Okay, any other questions? We could probably let Tonya get to bed, and I understand that Chris has probably got more walking to do. I'm on Queen Anne, Chris. Come on over, man. I am like a 45-minute walk uphill. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. Okay, so just a reminder, this has been recorded. Evan is going to help me get it up on our YouTube channel. It'll be up on the seattlechadd.com website under probably past meetings, I think, is what it's under. And also, please sign in I just want to check right now so I can see if we've got, wow, people. All I can say is this panel has been riveting. I shouldn't say nobody. We've gotten about 14 people sign in, but I've got everybody's name on my piece of paper, so y'all showed up. Good job. I'm gonna let everybody go. Does anybody need anything else tonight? Yeah, thank you, Jeremy.
All right, Bet, we're on.
Chris, Tonya,
Well,
thank you. And Suzanne, thank you so much.
Thank
Such
you
a
all.
pleasure.
Bye.
Good
Good
night.
night.